You're listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe of Torch in Houston, Texas. This is the Everyday Judaism Podcast.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Good morning. We are now resuming chapter 44, Siman 44, Siman Mem Daled, and we're up to Halacha Yud, Halacha number 10. Now, previously we discussed the laws of Mayim Achronim, which is the afterwaters after the meal, but before we recite the grace after meals, before the Birkas Hamazon. And then we talked about the blessings of Birkas Hamazon and things that need to be added. So halacha number Yud is b'Shabbos shechal bo Rosh Chodesh, when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh both coincide. So we add to our Shabbos grace after meals, we add the Retzei. On Rosh Chodesh we add Yaaleh V'Yavo. But which one comes first when they're both together, Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh? Oh, Chalamod, or the festival. Oh, Yom Tov or Chalamod. Omrim tchila Retzei v'achar kach Yaaleh V'Yavo. So we always say what is more frequent, and then the infrequent. What is more frequent? Shabbos. Shabbos is more frequent than Rosh Chodesh, and therefore we say the Retzei before the Yaaleh V'Yavo, mipnei shehaShabbos tadir u'mekudash yosem mihem. Because Shabbos is regular, it comes first. Halacha number 11. Someone who is unsure whether or not they recited the blessing after the meal or not. So if a person is satiated, like, oh, that was a good meal, so he's still obligated to that biblical command of grace after meals. And therefore, right, because it says ve'achalta v'savata uve'rachta, and you will eat and you'll be satiated and you will bless Hashem. So since he's still satiated, he's full, he's still obligated to that obligation, and he needs to recite the Birkas Hamazon again if he doesn't remember that he did it in the first time to begin with. V'chein im nirdam b'sheina be'emtza Birkas Hamazon. What happens if someone fell asleep in middle of the meal? He's not sure whether or not he recited the grace after meals. Or he was in middle of reciting the grace after meals and fell asleep in middle. That sometimes happens if you have heavy food, you drink some wine, it makes you drowsy. He's reciting the grace after meals and he falls asleep in middle. Now he wakes up. Did I finish the Birkat Hamazon? Did I finish my grace after meals or not? He needs to go back to the beginning of Birkas Hamazon. A woman who is unsure whether or not she recited the blessing, or she's not sure if she did or she didn't recite the blessing, she does not need to recite the blessing a second time. Now the reason most likely is because I think women are a little bit more careful to do things properly, particularly with regards to blessings, to ensure that they recite the blessing appropriately, and therefore they are not obligated in the same way. He says, although women are certainly obligated to recite Birkas Hamazon, it is an unresolved question whether their obligation to recite Birkas Hamazon is biblical in origin. Therefore, if a woman is in doubt whether she recited Birkas Hamazon, she is not obligated to recite it again. And see Mishnah Berurah regarding a woman who wishes to recite it in this situation. Okay. The halacha now continues about what to do if one forgot to recite Retzei and Yaaleh V'Yavo. So I'm not going to read all of it because it's 3 different blessings, but just let me give you, okay, what happens if someone forgets to say Retzei on Shabbos? What happens if someone forgets to say Yaaleh V'Yavo on Rosh Chodesh or holidays? And what happens if someone forgot to say Retzei and Yaaleh V'Yavo on Shabbos holiday? Okay, what do we do for each of them? The halacha here in Siman Mem Daled, Halacha Yud Beis, goes through the 3 different blessings that you can recite to compensate for that part that you forgot. Okay, so it means, here's the thing. If you remember before you recite the following blessing, you can go back and recite it. But if you already recited the name of Hashem in the following blessing, then you can no longer recite it in its proper place, then you add a blessing later. And here in Siman, in Seif Yud Beis, the halacha will say exactly the 3 different blessings that you can add after for for missing the Retzei. So we're gonna go past that now, and we're gonna go to Halacha Yud Gimel, because it would just be a lot of text of reading those blessings. Okay. Imlo niskar ad la'achar shehitchila bracha shalachareo shehi baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hokel avinu. So now he finished. Okay, so the way the blessings works, we have the first blessing of Hazanus Hakol, the second blessing of Al Haaretz Ve'al Hamazon, first blessing composed by Moses, second blessing composed by Joshua, very good, and then the third blessing by David and King Solomon, and then the fourth blessing, which is from our men of the Great Assembly. So now we started that fourth blessing. And where do we put the Shabbos and Yaaleh V'Yavo edition, the Rosh Chodesh edition? In the third blessing. It's right before the end of the third blessing. So now we are Halacha number 13. Im lo niskar, if one was not aware of his omission, ad la'achar sheitcha bracha shalachareo shehi baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hokel avinu afilu lo amarak tevas baruch bilvad. If you just said baruch, shuv ein lo takana bebrachos asher nasan ulechein im hu b'shtei seudos rishonos chozel l'rosh birkas hamazon. He says, therefore, if it's the first two meals of Shabbos or Yom Tov, you go back to the beginning of the benching and you start over again. But if you just said baruch atah Hashem, you should conclude with Lamdeni Chukecha, which is a verse, and that way it's not a blessing in vain. But by the third meal, afilu b'Shabbos eino mechuyev lechol pas dafka, because there's no obligation to specifically eat bread at that meal. Umikol shekain b'Yom Tov, and definitely on Yom Tov. B'Birkas Hamazon eino chovas hayom olav. Lochein eino chozel l'rosh, he does not return to the beginning of the blessing of the Birkas Hamazon. Ela gomer kach Birkas Hamazon, he just concludes the rest of Birkas Hamazon without correcting his mistake. Aval im niska b'makom sheyachol l'taken b'birchas asher nasan mechuyev l'taken afilu b'kama su'udas she'achal. He says, however, if he becomes aware of his omission at a place where he is able to rectify his mistake by reciting the compensatory blessing, those three blessings that we mentioned previously, then mechuyev, he is obligated to rectify his omission, even at any of the additional meals that were eaten. Okay, now Halacha 14. Ta b'Rosh Chodesh v'lomer Yaaleh V'Yavo. This happens, unfortunately, people forget on Rosh Chodesh, they're eating bread, they recite the grace after meals, and they forget, I forgot to add the Yaaleh V'Yavo, which is the addition we recite on holidays and on Rosh Chodesh. So if one made such a mistake, V'lo Omer Yaaleh V'Yavo, Omer Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher nasan Rosh Chodesh la'am Yisrael l'zikaron ve'eino chosem. So then what do? You add a blessing, and this is the blessing that we recite, and he does not conclude with a blessing. It doesn't make a difference whether it's the night of Rosh Chodesh or the day of Rosh Chodesh. You don't conclude with a blessing. B'chol hamoed, im lo amar Yaaleh V'Yavo, yomar baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher nasan moadim la'amo Yisrael usason l'simcha v'es yom chag, and then you add which holiday it is. Baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim. U'Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah as well, there's another blessing that's recited for that. So again, in not wanting to confuse everyone here, if you're in a situation, in most Sidurim will have the blessings that need to be recited if one forgot in the appropriate place to place the Retzei or the Yaaleh V'Yavo. After the blessing, you can recite an additional blessing to compensate for it. Rosh Chodesh shachal b'Shabbos v'shachach Retzei v'gam Yaaleh V'Yavo v'niskar v'omar baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher nasan kol el gam b'Rosh Chodesh bein b'psicha bein b'chasima v'omer asher nasan Shabbos l'menucha la'am Yisrael be'ava la'os u'lebris l'Rosh Chodesh l'zikaron baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Shabbos v'Yisrael v'Rosh Chodesh. So this is another blessing again that one should recite on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh if they made this mistake and forgot. Afal pisha b'Rosh Chodesh levad eino chosem hacha kevan shu chosem mishvil Shabbos. Now you recite a blessing. You don't do it for Rosh Chodesh, but you do it for Shabbos. You do add a blessing at the end of this edition on Shabbos. Maskir gam b'Rosh Chodesh then because it's also Rosh Chodesh, you will say this blessing for Shabbos and the Rosh Chodesh. Im Amar Retzei v'lo Amar Yaaleh V'Yavo, if he said Retzei but he didn't say the Yaaleh V'Yavo, v'lo nizkar ad la'achar shehitchil bracha shel acharel, eino chozel l'rosh, you do not return to the beginning. Deha shel Shabbos Amar u'b'shvil Rosh Chodesh eino chozer v'im Amar Yaaleh V'Yavo v'lo Amar Retzei hu chozer l'rosh. Okay, let me just explain what's going on here in Halacha number 15. So what happens is as follows. What happens if someone remembered to say the Retzei for Shabbos, but not the Yaaleh V'Yavo for Rosh Chodesh? Or vice versa. They remembered to say the Yaaleh V'Yavo, but not the Retzei. So the Retzei takes prominence over the Yaaleh V'Yavo. And therefore, if you remembered the Retzei, you do not repeat the whole Birkat HaMazon, the whole grace after meals. But if you remembered the Yaaleh V'Yavo, not the Retzei, you do return, because again, Retzei, because it's Shabbos, it has a more prominent place. By the way, just so that you understand, what is the holiest day of the year? Shabbos. Very good. Shabbos is holier than everything, holier than Yom Kippur, holier than Rosh Hashanah, and it's every week. What a special opportunity we have. Halacha number 16, and we have just 3 more left. B'Chanukah u'Purim im shochar lomar HaNissim v'lo nizkar ad la'achar she'amar Hashem b'chasimas habracha she'amar baruch atah Hashem eino chozer ach b'toch Harachaman yom Harachaman hu yaseh lanu HaNissim v'neflos k'mo she'aseh l'avosenu b'yom ha'mehim b'zman hazeh b'yimei matisyo b'yimei Mordechai. So what does he say? He says, if on Purim or on Chanukah you forget to say the HaNissim, the special insert for those days, so then you do not go back, but you can recite a blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, if you already said, you don't say it's not a special blessing, but you add in the Harachamans that we have at the end of our grace after meals, you add another one which says that may the compassionate one who performs miracles and wonders that he performed for our forefathers in those days at this time. And on Chanukah, then you add the Chanukah part of the prayer of the prayer, and then on Purim you add the Purim part. Halacha number Yud Zayin, which is number 17. Hu ochel b'Shabbos v'chosh v'lo, kevan shadayin hu lo yispal arvis, omer ritzei v'chein. Okay, so someone was eating Shabbos afternoon, v'chosh cholo, and it got dark. Shabbos ends. So now, do you recite the ritzei still? And it's almost Shabbos. You look outside, 3 stars are out, Shabbos is out. But you didn't take out Shabbos yet. So you extended your meal into the after Shabbos. So do you recite the Retzei from Shabbos? The answer is yes, you do recite the Retzei. And likewise with Yom Tov, you do recite the Rosh Chodesh, and you do recite the additions for Chanukah and Purim as well. Since the beginning of the meal was during the day, then you recite and mention the relevance of that day. Even though now that you're reciting the blessing is after that day. So what happens in the reverse? You start the meal before Rosh Chodesh, and you end the meal in Rosh Chodesh. Right? So now what do you do? So now if you ate also a bit of bread after nightfall, then you do say Yaaleh V'Yavo, because now it's considered a meal of that day. So too with Chanukah and Purim. If someone began eating Shabbos afternoon, and his meal extended into the night, and he ate during the nighttime a kazayis of bread, and the next day is Rosh Chodesh. And now what do? So now Shabbos ends, Rosh Chodesh begins. It's very interesting. So you're for sure saying Retzei because it's still Shabbos. But now you ate a piece of bread in the nighttime, which is already Rosh Chodesh. So you'll recite both, Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. Very interesting. Okay? And same as goes with Chanukah and Purim, and there are some that disagree with this ruling. Because they are contradictory events. Al-Kain, yesh li minoah shelo le'achol oz balayla. So then most people have the custom, in order to not contradict one another, because it's either Shabbos or it's weekday. Which one is it? You got to decide. That contradiction, in order to resolve that contradiction, most people don't eat the bread after that nightfall in order not to fall. But it's only in that situation. Typically, there are many people, many righteous people, who extend their Shabbos. Now, the Torah says you need to extend the Shabbos, even by a second, even by a minute, right? Either in the beginning or at the end, extend the Shabbos. The Shabbos shouldn't be only from sunset to stars out. Add something. So we add 18 minutes. That's why we have 18 minutes before sunset. You want to know what time candlelighting is? It's always 18 minutes before sunset. So if you ask your Google or your Apple or your Alexa or whoever your choice of AI is, and you say, what time is sunset tonight on a Friday? And they will tell you it's at 6 o'clock. Candlelighting would be 5:42. 18 minutes before that would be the candlelighting. Okay? That's why, because you add to the Shabbos. We always add to the Shabbos. Okay. If one is not able to, because of whatever emergency, you're running back from a doctor's office and you're late or whatever, you have at sunset is the appropriate time for one not to delay. And finally, Halacha Yud Ches, Im yesh oved kochavim babayis kishemevorach birkas hamazon yomar osanu bnei bris kulanu yachad. Because we say one of the Harachaman that we say, one of the things we say, compassionate one, we say all of those that are in this house. But if you have a worker who's finishing up fixing your plumbing, right? So you should make sure that you include the members of the covenant of this home should be included in that blessing. Okay. And then next week, God willing, we will continue with Halacha Siman 45, which is all about the Zimun. Does anybody know what the Zimun is? Zimun is the welcoming people to recite the grace after meals together. So if you have 3 men or 3 women sitting together and eating a meal together, then you invite everyone, come, let's thank Hashem together. And there's a process in how that's done. We're going to talk about that next week. And this concludes, my dear friends, Siman 44. I look forward to your questions in Ask Away number 34.
You've been listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe on a podcast produced by Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. Please help sponsor an episode so we can continue to produce more quality Jewish content for our listeners around the globe. Please visit torchweb.org to donate and partner with us on this incredible endeavor.